Joseph was a man who was made prepared for that moment in time when God brought the vision to Pharaoh that needed to be explained. A vision of 7 years of good crops and 7 years of famine. This man was prepared to be able to preserve the lives of many people. And because of that, his family was welcomed into Egypt with open arms. They inhabited one of the more fruitful and fertile parts of Egypt, that is Goshen. And they enjoyed life there, a life of freedom, and a life where they were allowed to thrive. As Exodus chapter 1 verse 7 says, and the Israelites became fruitful and began to increase greatly, and they kept on multiplying and growing mightier at an extraordinary rate, so that the land became filled with them. In verse 8 of Exodus chapter 1 says, in time there arose over Egypt a new king, one who did not know Joseph. So he said to his people, look, the people of Israel are more numerous and mightier than we are. Let us deal shrewdly with them. Otherwise they will continue to multiply. And if a war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us and leave the country. So they appointed chiefs of forced labor over them to oppress them with hard labor. And they built storage cities for Pharaoh, namely Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they would oppress them, the more they would multiply, and the more they kept spreading out. So they felt sick with the fear because of the Israelites. Consequently, the Egyptians forced the Israelites into harsh slavery. They made their life bitter with hard labor as they worked with clay mortar and bricks and in every form of slavery in the field. Yes, they made them toil in harsh conditions in every form of slavery. The appreciation of what Joseph had done had worn off. All he could see was these people, Israel, are numerous, and his mind mightier than we are. He's feeling a threat. His race is feeling a threat. He's bringing out a threat that he feels that threatens the Egyptians as a nation, as a race. And so he wants to make Egypt great again. MAGA, make Egypt great again. And what happens to do that? Well, he brings forth a conspiracy theory. Well, if we don't do something, if war comes out against us, they're going to fight with our enemies. Well, what evidence did he have of that? Why couldn't he have thought the other way? That they would have been helpful to us because of the welcome that we allowed them to live in Goshen. And because of that conspiracy theory, that racist propaganda, they engaged in enslaving them and making their life bitter by oppression. One day they were enjoying the blue skies of freedom. The next day is the dark clouds of oppression and slavery. All because of some conspiracy theory. If you notice, there was also a profiteering part of this, getting them to build these cities and having that slave labor to do it. So at the end of it is a profiteering. So when a race many times feels threatened, this is when this oppressive mode goes into action. And it shows you why human governments can never be trusted with the mantle of governance. Like with the nation of Israel, there was to be one law for the native and the foreigner. That's the gold standard. No partiality. It's not they, it's who. With racist society, it is not who, it's they. And when they feel threatened, they begin to engage in racist propaganda, conspiracy theories, imputing wrong motives on people. And this opens the gateway to oppression and all sorts of atrocities. They got their minds on making money too, based on racism, because one of the ways this is the way they can divert attention from who's really causing the nation problem. It allows those who are rich to foment a diversion tactic on people who are not really the ones responsible for the problems, while they take the money out the back door. But then later, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives in verse 15 of Exodus chapter 1, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah. And he told them, when you help the Hebrew women to give birth, and you see them on the stool for childbirth, you must put the child to death if it is a son. But if it's a daughter, she must live. However, the midwives feared the true God, and they did not do what the king of Egypt told them. Instead, they would keep the male children alive. In time, the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you kept the male children alive? The midwives said to Pharaoh, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are lively and have already given birth before the midwife can come in to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people kept increasing and becoming very mighty. And because the midwives had feared the true God, he later gave them families. Finally, Pharaoh commanded all his people, you are to throw every newborn son of the Hebrews into the Nile River, but you are to keep every daughter alive. So this is what, when it comes to racism, the primary focus is the male. And when you look at how everything is done, you'll see that that's the focus. Keep that male down, denigrate him, make him not a factor. And you'll find that in every racist society they'll do that. Now, they'll attack the woman too, for sure. But they definitely are going to make the male their attack, or their object of attack. Now, here we see that the Egyptians said, we're not getting anywhere. They continue to multiply in spite of our oppression, so we're going to start killing babies. And this is what they were doing. To control this number, they were killing all the males, just throwing them in the Nile River. And they did that after the Hebrew midwives wouldn't go along with their plan. They wouldn't work to help the Egyptians to kill Hebrew babies. Because they didn't do that, God blessed them. So every time people engage in abortion, they weaken the nation. You look at black people. Since Roe v. Wade, 60 million abortions. They killed their babies, so they work to their own disadvantage. And it's many nations, they use abortion to control the numbers, and they control those numbers so that they don't have to spend as much money on their population, more money for them and their rich buddies. But God already made the decision for Christians have children. They do not engage in abortion. Chapter 2, verse 1, it says, about that time a certain man of the house of Levi married a daughter of Levi, and the woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw how beautiful he was, she kept him concealed for 3 months. When she was no longer able to conceal him, she took a papyrus basket and coated it with bitumen and pitch and put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile River. But his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Some wonder, why did she do this? Well, she did that because she didn't want that child to die Egypt's way. If the child was going to die, it's going to die her way. At least give the child a chance. And so that's what was done. When Pharaoh's daughters came down to bathe in the Nile, her female attendants were walking by the side of the Nile, and she caught sight of the basket in the middle of the reeds. She immediately sent her slave girl to get it, and when she opened it, she saw the child, and the boy was crying. She felt compassion for him, but she said, this is one of the children of the Hebrews. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nursing woman from the Hebrews to nurse the child for you? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And once the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter then said to her, take this child with you and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became a son to her. She named him Moses and said, "It is because I have drawn him out of the water." Because of her actions, her baby was returned to her. She didn't work in harmony with the Egyptians, but she did everything she could to preserve that child's life. And because of that, the baby was brought back to her. And not only was she going to get, she preserved the baby's life, she was going to get to nurse her own child. And she was going to get paid for it. Now, verse 11, it says, "Now in those days, after Moses had become an adult, he went out to his brothers to look at the burdens they were bearing. And he caught sight of an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brothers. So he looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. But when he went out on the following day, and there were two Hebrew men fighting, and with each other. So he said to the one in the wrong, 'Why do you strike your companion?' At this he said, 'Who appointed you as a prince and a judge over us? Are you planning to kill me just as you killed the Egyptian?' Moses now was afraid and said, 'Surely the matter has become known.' And so we know he fled to Midian and resided there for 40 years. So here we see another example or element of this racist slavery that was going on, in that here Moses was trying to give some relief to his brothers. He was went out to look upon their burdens, not to look upon them and look down on them, but to see what he could do to make it easier to deliver them. And there have been people today that have stood up and tried to do something to relieve the oppression from one race on the other, the racism, to relieve the evil, the hardness, the bitterness of such racism. But as with Moses and what he did, it was temporary. But you notice after he did that, the next day, two Hebrew men were fighting each other. And he was saying, "Why do you strike your companion?" So this is what oppression it does. It will set the races being oppressed upon each other. In fact, unlike the Hebrew midwives, who did not go along with the Egyptian MAGA plan of killing the male babies, they wouldn't comply. There are many who are the ones who oppress will get right in the lap of their oppressor and look for a pat on the head. They'll look in there and tell them, "I love you," and this and that. Imagine that. They will exalt these ones who have enslaved them, who have taken their wealth, who have slapped them around. They're right there in the lap of those. You see, no matter who you are, you never take the side of the oppressor. Many people do it because, again, they want that pat on the head. They want to be able to make money. They want to be to get in on the good side of the oppressor so that they can benefit in whatever way. But you never, even Moses knew not to take the side of the oppressor. But again, this deliverance that the Israelites needed did not come till 40 years later, when God actually sent Moses forth to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And he empowered Moses with all the signs and the wonders to get Pharaoh to do this. And what happened on their way out was, the Bible shows, the Israelites plundered the Egyptians of their goods. Yes, reparations were paid. Jesus said the workers were worthy of wages. Who did he learn that from? From his Father, from God. That's how God does it. You don't get free wages. You don't get to enslave people and figure you're not going to pay. James chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you. Your wealth has rotted, and your and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you. So these cries for these reparations, for the payment was not made, goes to the Lord Almighty. And he will, just like we did with the Israelites, he will get that money paid eventually. One way or the other, it's going to get paid. So again, we had MAGA, Make Egypt Great Again. Today we have MAGA. Both racist efforts and both face the same thing, intervention from God.